The sun dipped low behind the hills, bleeding gold and crimson across the Wyoming sky. Elijah Kane stood at the edge of his porch, hands rough and calloused, gripping a tin mug of lukewarm coffee. His eyes squinted into the distance, where dust stirred on the horizon. A shape moved, small, uncertain. He stepped forward, boots crunching dry dirt. That's when he saw her. A girl, limping. Her dress clung to her thin frame, torn at the hem and stained dark with old blood. She stumbled, caught herself, and looked up. Even from a distance Elijah could see it. Pure fear in her eyes, wide and hollow. She had no hat, no canteen, no horse. Just a limp and a silence that felt heavier than the air. "God Almighty," he muttered, setting his mug down. Thomas, the ranch hand, appeared from the barn, wiping grease from his fingers. "You seen that?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Elijah nodded. "Girl's alone. Hurt." Thomas hesitated. "Might be more trouble than she's worth." Elijah didn't answer. He walked straight to the gate and opened it. When the girl finally reached the porch, she collapsed to her knees. He caught her before she hit the boards. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She shook her head, lips cracked, voice a whisper. "Don't let them find me." That night the wind carried a bitter chill through the canyon. Elijah laid the girl on a cot in the spare room, brought her water, cleaned the wound on her ankle. She flinched at every touch but didn't protest. Still, not a name, not a story. Thomas watched from the doorway, arms folded. "This ain't right, boss. She's a child. She's a trap, more like. Folks don't end up walking out of nowhere like that without something chasing them." Elijah didn't answer. He sat by her side, watching her breathe, shallow, uneven. She had bruises up her arms, some old, some fresh. One hand clutched a pendant on a frayed string carved from bone. Later, in the quiet of midnight, the horses stirred. Elijah rose instantly. He moved to the window, shotgun in hand. Nothing, just the wind. And yet, something felt wrong. Wrong in the bones. Out on the ridge, shadows moved. But when he blinked, they were gone. Back inside, the girl stirred. Her eyes opened, and for the first time she spoke with clarity. Just 3 words. "They found me." Morning came sharp and dry. Elijah stepped out to the barn with his rifle slung across his back. Dew clung to the earth, but the air carried a stillness that made the hair rise on his arms. As he approached the stables, his boots stopped short. Prints, fresh. Deep boot marks near the side gate, too clean to be his, too far from Thomas's usual path. He crouched, touching the earth. 5, maybe 6 men walking, not riding. Back at the house, he found Thomas already pacing. "You see 'em?" Thomas asked, voice low. Elijah nodded. "South Ridge. They were watching." Thomas spat in the dirt. "That girl brought wolves." Inside, the girl sat up on the cot, eyes shadowed, arms wrapped around her knees. She'd cleaned herself some, but still hadn't said much. Until now. "My name's Lydia." Elijah met her gaze. "Who's after you?" She hesitated, like the words burned on the way up. "My uncle. He's not right." Thomas scoffed. "Hell of a lot of folks ain't right. Don't mean they send a posse creeping through brush." Lydia's voice dropped. "He calls himself a preacher, Reverend Malachi Thorne. He says he's the mouth of God." That name pulled something cold through Elijah's spine. He'd heard it once in a saloon 2 winters back, a whisper about a settlement cut off from the world, ruled by fire and fear. "He punishes anyone who questions him," she continued, "especially women, especially me." "Why you?" Elijah asked. "Because I ran. Because I said no." Outside, a hawk shrieked. Thomas crossed his arms. "He ain't just hunting her for family," Thomas said. "This is a message." Lydia nodded slowly. "He'll send them tonight. And if you try to stop them—" She didn't finish. Elijah walked to the cabinet and unlocked it. Inside were 3 rifles, ammunition, a box of old tin stars, and a rusted cavalry saber. He took one rifle and handed it to Thomas. "She stays." "No matter what." Thomas didn't argue. That said enough. As night approached, Lydia lingered by the window, gaze distant. He used to say the flames would burn the evil out, she whispered. Elijah sat nearby, oiling his shotgun. You believe that? She shook her head. No, but they do. Elijah studied her. She looked young still, but there was iron behind her words. The kind forged in pain, not years. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes locked on the horizon. They'll come with torches, she said softly. They always do. The town of Ellery sat 30 miles east of Elijah's ranch, just a cluster of buildings gripping dust and memory. And that morning a storm rode in from the desert. 6 men entered, cloaked in black dusters, their horses frothing with sweat. At their head was Reverend Malachi Thorne. He dismounted slowly, boots thudding against the packed earth. His hair was bone white, long and tied back, and his eyes held a gleam too calm for the chaos he brought. The townsfolk froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the sheriff paused, fingers twitching at his belt. Behind Malachi came Amos, a tower of flesh with arms like fence posts and a gaze as vacant as a barn wall. Beside him, Jeb, thin as wire, moved with the restless twitch of a snake before it strikes. And last, Sister Ruth, her face covered by a linen veil, voice silent, but known by all who'd ever seen her whip justice from bone. Malachi stepped into the saloon like he owned it. He didn't order a drink, he simply spoke. A girl passed through, limping, fair-haired. Have you seen her? The bartender swallowed hard. Ain't seen no girl, Reverend. Malachi turned. If that's a lie, God will know. No one corrected him. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Elijah worked in silence. The barn was reinforced. Water barrels stacked, traps set along the fence. Thomas rode out early to scout the ridge, returning late with grim news. They were in Ellery asking about her. Elijah nodded. How many? At least 6, more likely 10. Some of them ain't talking, just watching. Inside the house, Lydia cleaned dishes as if nothing had changed. Her limp was easing, but her silence had grown deeper. You know them, Elijah said. They're not men, she answered softly. They're his hands. Who's the woman? Thomas asked. Ruth. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Thomas scratched his beard. Sounds like a nightmare stitched from the Book of Revelations. That's how they live, Lydia said. Fear and fire, he calls it the anointed path. Said we were chosen to burn the rot out of this world. Elijah leaned against the doorframe, eyes hard. And what do they do with the ones who disagree? Lydia looked down at her hands. They make them disappear. Outside, clouds began to gather over the mountains. Not storm clouds, smoke. Distant, dark, and deliberate. Tomas pointed. Signal fire. Ain't no doubt now. Elijah's jaw clenched. He walked out to the barn, ran his hand across the smooth oak and checked the oil lamps. Lydia followed him, stopping just short of the threshold. If you stay, you'll burn with me, she said. Elijah didn't look back. Then we'll burn standing up. Night fell fast and heavy, swallowing the last color from the sky. The ranch sat still, too still, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Elijah loaded the final shells into his rifle. Tomas lit the lanterns. Lydia sat at the window, fingers tight around the bone pendant. Then came the first torchlight. A flicker on the southern ridge, another to the west. One by one, flames appeared, forming a perfect ring around the barn and house. Not random, ritual. Elijah stepped onto the porch, rifle at his side. He counted shadows, too many to name. Voices rose in unison, chanting. Cleanse the rot, burn the unclean, light the path. Lydia stood behind him, trembling. It's begun. Malachi emerged from the dark, torch in one hand, holy book in the other. He stepped forward alone, his voice booming with calm conviction. Return what belongs to us, and no fire will touch your roof. Resist, and we shall burn every trace of sin from this soil. Elijah didn't answer. Malachi's tone shifted. You shelter corruption, Elijah Kane, a fallen girl who defied God's law. He raised the torch higher. Elijah, Lydia whispered behind him. Please, you don't have to die for me. He looked back at her, voice steady. I'm not dying. I'm deciding. Then he stepped forward and raised his rifle. The shot cracked the silence, splitting the torch from Malachi's hand. Flames spilled into the dust, sputtering out. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the shouting began. From the east, a torch arced through the air and crashed into the hay pile beside the barn. Flames leapt skyward, feeding greedily. Horses screamed inside. Thomas sprinted toward the stalls, trying to cut them loose. Bullets tore through the dark, shattering windows. Elijah fired into the trees, hitting one man, then another. Lydia ducked behind the water trough, covering her ears. The chanting stopped. Screams replaced it. Sister Ruth moved through the fire like a ghost, whip cracking in the air. She struck a lantern, sending oil splashing across the porch. It lit instantly. Elijah turned just in time to see her retreat into shadow. "Back inside!" he shouted. Lydia scrambled through the doorway. Smoke filled her lungs. Coughing, she grabbed the shotgun from the wall and clutched it to her chest. Outside, Elijah and Thomas held their ground. Wood groaned. The roof over the stables caved with a roar. Embers rained down. Inside the barn, the last horse broke free, bolting into the night. Lydia stared at the door, pulse hammering. She whispered to herself, not in fear, but in memory. They always come with fire, but they never expect to be burned. The barn roared behind them, flames clawing at the sky. Elijah's shirt clung to his skin, soaked with sweat and smoke. He stood at the edge of the porch, rifle raised, eyes scanning the fire-lit shadows for movement. Tomas stumbled out from the side of the barn, limping, arm pressed tight to his ribs. Blood leaked between his fingers. "Got the last horse out," he grunted. "But they nicked me." Elijah pulled him behind the water trough. "Can you still shoot?" Thomas managed a grim smile. "Long as I got eyes." Gunfire cracked again. A figure emerged through smoke. Amos. He charged, axe raised, yelling like a beast. Elijah fired twice. One shot grazed the shoulder, the other missed. Then another shot. Sharp, clean. Amos stopped mid-step, stumbled, and dropped to one knee. Blood spread across his chest. From the side window Lydia stood, shotgun trembling in her hands. Elijah looked up, stunned. "You hit him." She didn't smile. She just reloaded. The ring of torches began to break. Some men fled into the trees. Others dragged Amos's body into the dark. Malachi's voice rose again, distant but commanding. "Withdraw, let the fire do its work." A final torch hurled through the window. It shattered glass and ignited the curtains. Flames licked the walls in seconds. Lydia ran from room to room, dumping water over cloth, but it spread too fast. Elijah kicked open the back door, coughing, helping Thomas outside. The air was thick, choking. Lydia followed close, face streaked with soot. They reached the edge of the yard, surrounded by falling ash and smouldering debris. The barn was gone. The house crackled, timbers groaning under the weight of flame. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Elijah looked at Lydia. "You shot to kill." "I shot to live," she said. Tomas sat hard on a log, groaning. "If this is your idea of a quiet night, I'm getting too old for it." They bandaged Tomas's side. The bleeding slowed, but his breathing was ragged. Elijah kept his eyes on the tree line. "They'll be back," he muttered. Lydia nodded. "He won't accept failure, not twice." Elijah looked around, barn gone, house gutted, livestock scattered, yet they stood, alive. "We hit 'em harder than they expected," Tomas said. "Maybe that preacher ain't invincible after all." Elijah didn't answer. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. The flames began to die down. Smoke curled into the stars. Somewhere out there, Malachi watched and waited. And inside Lydia's heart, something old and fragile turned to steel. The canyon beyond Dead Man's Ridge was a place no one ventured, narrow, winding, full of silent winds and old stories. Elijah guided the remaining horse through the twisting trail. Thomas slumped behind him, pale and half-conscious. Lydia followed on foot, eyes sharp, her limp almost gone. They made camp beneath a stone overhang where the canyon walls met. The fire was small, shielded by rock. Tomas groaned as Lydia tightened the bandage across his ribs. "He'll live," she said. but he needs rest. Elijah stared into the flames. We bought ourselves time, not safety. Lydia sat across from him, the shadows dancing over her face. You could have left me. He didn't respond. You still can. Elijah's eyes lifted. Is that what you want? No, she said, but I don't want more people dying for me. Tomas chuckled dryly from his blanket. Too late for that. Silence settled again, thick and raw. Finally, Elijah spoke, his voice low like a confession pulled from a wound. I fought in the war. Thought I knew what monsters looked like. Wore blue, did my duty. But there was a captain, Union like me. He ordered a fire through a Confederate town, claimed it held snipers. Lydia's eyes stayed on him steady. There were women, children. No rifles, no fight, just ash after. I followed orders, I lived with it. He looked up, until one day I couldn't anymore. Lydia's voice was quiet. So you ran. I left everything, buried my wife, buried my daughter, came west to start again. Thought if I kept to myself, maybe nothing would follow. But something always does, Lydia finished. The wind stirred. Coyotes cried far off, but none came close. The next morning, Elijah handed Lydia a revolver. It's yours now. Know how to use it? She nodded. I do now. They spent the day fortifying the canyon mouth, rocks stacked high, choke points marked. Elijah taught Lydia how to listen for footfalls in sand, how to move low and silent, how to shoot twice and breathe between. That night, as stars scattered across the velvet sky, Lydia sat by the fire with Thomas snoring softly nearby. I don't feel like her anymore, she said. The girl who ran. Elijah looked at her, something shifting behind his tired eyes. You're not. She nodded once. Then maybe it's time we stop running too. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. What are you thinking? We find him. Before he finds us. Elijah didn't answer right away, but he reached into his pack, pulling out a worn map, the edges curling with age. He spread it between them. There's only one place he could be hiding that many men. She leaned closer. Then that's where we go. The settlement lay deep within the saltbrush basin, hidden behind crags and ravines, cloaked in dust and scripture. Elijah and Lydia approached at dawn, their faces smeared with ash, clothes borrowed from abandoned camps. They moved like shadows, unremarkable, unnoticed. Just two more bodies in a place ruled by silence. The town wasn't large, 30, maybe 40 people. No saloon, no laughter, just sermons and fear. Children whispered instead of playing. Women walked with eyes downcast. Men stared too long, as if looking could keep them from falling apart. They entered through the western path. Elijah tipped his hat to a passing man who didn't tip his back. Where's the preacher? Elijah asked quietly. Lydia kept her voice low. There's a chapel at the center. They meet at dawn and dusk. They slipped among the crowd, pretending to belong. At the chapel doors they saw it, a massive wooden cross scorched black wrapped in barbed wire. A symbol of control, not salvation. Inside, Reverend Malachi preached with fire. His voice rolled through the room like thunder over dry plains. The weak will be cast aside, the doubters shall burn, only the anointed walk the path to grace. Sister Ruth stood behind him, silent as ever. Her eyes scanned the crowd, always moving. Elijah and Lydia stayed near the back, heads lowered. But Lydia's fingers twitched. She spotted two girls in the corner, barefoot, barely 12. Their hands were bound with twine. Lydia's jaw tightened. After the sermon, the congregation began to disperse. Elijah motioned Lydia aside, toward an alley between two shacks. We don't have time for rescue missions, he warned. She met his stare. That's all this is. That night, they returned under cover of darkness. Tomas had left a signal fire 5 miles north. Diversion in case things turned. Lydia crept into the holding shed where the girls were kept. She broke the rope, whispered promises, led them into the scrubland. Elijah covered their trail. They made it halfway out before Jeb spotted them. He raised the alarm. The town flared with shouting. Lanterns swung in every hand. Boots thundered on wooden porches. Elijah fired a warning shot. The crowd ducked. That was their window. Lydia ran with the girls through the eastern ridge. Elijah fired again, clipped a man's shoulder, and vanished into the brush. They regrouped at the dry creek bed. The girls were safe, for now. Lydia looked back once toward the light still flaring in the distance. "You saw them," she said. "They're afraid." Elijah nodded. "Fear breaks chains. They'll come harder now." He checked his bullets. "So will we." Red Mesa rose like a scar from the earth, jagged stone, blood-colored cliffs, and ancient winds that whispered through dry bones. It was here Malachi planned his judgment. Here he'd burn Lydia in front of the faithful, to prove that even rebellion could be crushed by righteousness. But Elijah had other plans. He and Lydia approached from the canyon mouth at dusk. Thomas had gone ahead hours earlier, dragging satchels of dynamite through old mining tunnels beneath the mesa. If things turned bloody, the cliffs would fall with them. Above, bonfires were already lit. Malachi stood before his followers, voice lifted in sermon. "She has defied the path. She brought chaos into our fold. Tonight, the fire will speak, and the heavens will bear witness." Lydia crouched low, pistol in hand. Her breath came steady. She no longer shook when he spoke. Elijah peered through the rocks. "He's riling them up. If we wait too long, they'll kill her." He looked at her. "You ready?" Lydia nodded. "I've been ready since the barn." They moved fast. Thomas lit the fuses beneath the northern ridge. Sparks danced through the tunnels like fireflies with purpose. Elijah opened fire first. His shot clipped Malachi's pulpit, splintering the wood. Panic rippled through the crowd. Screams, shouts, followers scattered in all directions. Lydia flanked left, sliding down a slope of shale. She fired into the air, forcing the guards to duck. 2 women broke from the pen where prisoners were held. Thomas shouted from the ridge, waving them toward safety. Malachi stood unmoving. In the chaos, he drew a long knife, eyes fixed on the shadow approaching. "Elijah Kane," he called, "the coward of Coldwater Ridge, come to finish what your sins began?" Elijah stepped forward, rifle lowered. "No sermons today, Malachi, just an ending." They met at the center, hands bare, rifle cast aside, knuckles split flesh. The old soldier and the false prophet, rage and ideology colliding. Blow after blow. Malachi struck like a serpent, fast and cruel. Elijah fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Lydia circled the fight, covering them. She spotted Jeb pulling a rifle from beneath a cart. She didn't hesitate. One shot. Jeb dropped like a stone. Malachi screamed, lunged with the knife. Elijah blocked barely, but the blade cut deep across his ribs. Then Lydia stepped forward. Calm, measured. She raised her pistol and aimed it at the man who once called her blood. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. His sneer faltered. She fired. Once. Clean. Right through the chest. Malachi collapsed, knife still clutched, eyes wide with disbelief. He didn't speak again. Behind them, the northern ridge exploded. Fire swallowed the cliff's edge, sending rocks tumbling over the fleeing cultists. And Red Mesa burned, not with judgment, but with freedom. Dawn broke over Red Mesa in silence. Smoke still curled from the shattered ridge, painting the horizon with streaks of gray. The air was thick with ash and the echo of something finally finished. Elijah sat against a boulder, shirt torn and blood soaking his side. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Lydia knelt beside him, wrapping fresh cloth around the wound. Her hands were steady, her face calm. "You're lucky," Tomas muttered nearby, his arm in a sling. "That knife missed your heart by half a breath." Elijah grunted. "Guess my heart ain't where it used to be." They sat together in the quiet. Around them the camp was abandoned. Most of Malachi's followers had fled into the hills. Others stayed behind, bewildered, dazed, unsure of what to believe now that the voice commanding their fear was gone. Lydia looked across the burned-out ground where the cross had once stood. Nothing remained but blackened posts and scorched earth. "It's over," she said, but Elijah shook his head. "Ending a man don't end what he did." She glanced toward the ravine. A group of women, young and old, stood watching them. One of the girls Lydia had helped escape stepped forward, holding her hand. "Thank you," the child said. Lydia nodded, kneeling to meet her eyes. You're free now. That's what matters. The girl smiled faintly and turned away, walking back to the others. Thomas leaned on his good leg. We should move soon. Won't be long before the scavengers come. Where to? Lydia asked. Elijah pushed himself to his feet with a groan. Back west, there's still land out there, still good soil. She studied him. You're not going to hide again. He met her gaze. I'm going to build. They moved slowly through the canyon, the sun rising higher, casting golden light across the broken mesa. Behind them, the wind carried the last embers away. By midday, they reached the first fork in the trail. Elijah stopped, breathing hard, hand pressed to his side. You sure you want this? He asked. Lydia looked forward. Her eyes didn't waver. I don't want to run anymore. I want to live. Thomas let out a tired chuckle. Then let's ride while the light's still good. They walked on. That evening they camped beneath the stars. No more sermons, no more smoke, just the steady rhythm of breath and firelight. Elijah leaned back, watching the flames. She shot him clean, he said. Didn't flinch. Thomas nodded. She's not a girl anymore. No, Elijah whispered. She's something stronger. And Lydia, sitting quietly on the other side of the fire, didn't smile, but in her silence there was peace. Months passed, and the winds of Wyoming carried a different sound. Hammer on nail, saw through wood, laughter rising like smoke from fresh-built cabins. The ranch Elijah once called home was gone, but in its place stood something new, modest, strong, alive. Children played in the fields where fire once raged. Chickens clucked. Water flowed from the well Thomas had rebuilt with one good arm, and endless curses. Lydia stood near the corral, brush in hand, smoothing the coat of a chestnut mare. She no longer limped. The scar on her ankle had faded, but the strength it left behind stayed sharp in her eyes. Elijah approached, carrying a sack of seed on his shoulder. North fence held through the storm, he said. Think we'll have beans by summer. Lydia gave a small smile. And tomatoes. Maybe even peaches, if the tree holds. He set the sack down and looked around. More cabins were rising on the ridge, homes for those who'd escaped Malachi's grip, those who wandered west seeking something better. Never thought I'd live to see it, Elijah said. Peace. Lydia nodded. It's not just peace, it's proof. Proof? That fire doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it clears the ground for something better. Elijah chuckled softly. You sound like a preacher. She smirked. Don't insult me. From the road a wagon rolled in, 2 women and a boy, faces wary, eyes searching. Elijah walked to meet them. Are you folks looking for land? He asked. The woman at the reins nodded. Heard stories about a place where the old ways don't follow, where people build instead of burn. He glanced back at Lydia, who raised a hand in silent welcome. You heard right, Elijah said. You're home if you want it. They unloaded quietly, joining the rhythm of something just beginning. That night the stars returned in full, bright, unblinking, like witnesses to something sacred. Thomas played a worn harmonica by the fire. Someone passed bread. Someone else laughed. For the first time in years, no one looked over their shoulder. Lydia sat beside Elijah. She no longer clutched the bone pendant. It hung from the barn wall now, a relic of who she'd been. Think they'll come back? She asked. Not if they're smart, he said. But if they do? She nodded. We'll be ready. They sat in silence, watching sparks rise into the sky. Elijah broke it with a murmur. You did good, girl. I'm not a girl anymore, she said. He looked at her, smiled. No. You're a flame that refused to go out. And in the distance, where prairie met stars, hope took root in the soil scorched by faith and blood. If Lydia's journey moved you, subscribe now to join us for more true grit tales from the edge of the West. And don't miss the next chapter. Click the video on your screen to ride into another unforgettable story.